want to get specific for people too, because they're going to wonder. So, what is your either current or what was done to get to where you are now with the 18-inch arms as far as like bicep and tricep exercise selection? And well, let's start with that, and then we can
Yeah.
go into like volume and whatnot.
Yeah. So preacher curls and Smith JM press are like I can't understate how big of a role those lifts played.
Hmm.
It's like I'm talking like the vast majority of the growth came from those two lifts. Those are the only two lifts that stayed constant in my program the whole time. There were a couple of other like secondary lifts that I would do after that I'm sure helped net me more growth, but they're complementary lifts. So if I'm doing a preacher curl and that's my bread and butter lift because the mechanics and the leverages and the overall resistance profile, the strictness, everything is just great. But it doesn't, you can't do everything in one lift or you're just going to sacrifice other important variables. So a preacher curl, it trains the biceps nicely in a lengthened position with a obviously a strict technique, and you're also supinated the whole time. So if I was to try and kind of like round that out in that session, maybe doing something like a Bayesian curl after that would make sense. So I can get maybe more of a mid-range resistance profile, but also get a stretch on the biceps. And maybe I could work in some supination as I do that lift. So that trains probably different functions of the bicep, which likely probably grows different regions, or at least just helps me kind of develop at least some strength in different areas of the range of motion of a curl. But those are all secondary. So I say pick your lifts, pick stuff that works for you, and then round it out with what that lift is missing. Smith JM press obviously trains the lateral and medial head really well in a very lengthened position, fairly deep stretch. The long head, of course, it's a biarticular muscle, so you're not really going to be able to train it optimally with the JM press. So you could probably include some type of work where your upper arm doesn't move, whether you choose to do that overhead or by your side. Probably doesn't matter as much as people think it does. All that matters is just that your arm doesn't change, so your basically long head doesn't lengthen at one end while shortening at the other end. So something where it's truly just an isolation, probably not a bad idea.
The preacher curl, is that a barbell preacher curl?
Yeah, easy bar to be, I guess, specific.
Okay. Yeah, that's the one movement that I get a little bit worried because it just seems like 90% of bicep tears are either from that or a mixed grip deadlift. Like that is where pretty much all bicep tears seem to happen.
Yeah, I would say that mostly has to do with just not building it up properly. So people that are just going too heavy too quick, not controlling their technique. PED is obviously another good example, but even like for myself now, if we're just going to take the anecdote of myself, uh, I do like one quick warm up set with 60 pounds or something, and then I do my working sets. I'm doing it with 120 now, and I can go all the way down, hang out down there. Like it feels totally fine. Like if I'm just going based on my anecdote and my own feeling, like there's not a single issue with it. So I think just kind of easing into it, slowly increasing your range of motion slash adding weight. I think you should be totally fine. Even if you want to do it as a secondary lift and stay away from failure for a bit and slowly work up your intensity, like I think that would be fine as long as you can build strength and size in that distal region of the bicep. Another quick anecdote here is I notice sensationally and a in terms of like a pump, just two obviously not rock solid anecdotes, but after a set of preacher curls, I can feel the pump to an insane degree in the very bottom of my biceps in this very distal region. And I think there's something about doing a length and bias lift that does grow the basically more distal region of a muscle a bit more. And I would have to say that's probably some type of clue there. And I think if you take into account the fact that most bicep training is short biased, when you're only strong in the short position and maybe you're more developed in the more proximal region of the bicep, if you're going right into something like a preacher curl as an intermediate lifter, but you have really never trained any lifts that have much tension at all down here, I think that could be when you might get into some trouble. But as long as you ease into it and build some strength and size down here, I think you would be totally fine. So I would say probably it's probably just a regional hypertrophy issue, which is causing those injuries.
Yeah, there is actually, I think it was a Life Fitness machine where they had a preacher curl machine. That was actually very smooth and I felt very safe doing it. 120 pounds though is a ton for a preacher curl. There's no way like you were saying you don't think you could do the 135-pound curls, but again, like these were loose form curls. So
Mhm.
you for sure, if you're doing 120-pound preacher curls, for sure you could do 135 barbell curls, with a little oomph in there.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I was doing I think it was 110 or 115 and I hit like a set of six, a set of five, and that wasn't that long ago. That wasn't I can't remember when it was. It honestly it could have been like last Thanksgiving. It could have been in February. It was
Hmm.
probably 4 to 6 months ago, and I wasn't terribly weaker on preacher curls. I was probably doing sets with 100 pounds back then. So in terms of preacher curls, that's a big difference, even though it's
Yeah,
only 20 pounds, the percentage is fairly large.
sure.
Um, 135, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'd be I I definitely don't think I'd be above that, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but no, that's really strong for preacher curls. I don't even know, what I could do with preacher curls from now. So the JM press, you don't hear too many, and maybe more now, but for the most part, it's not something you hear a ton about. I mean, barbell JM presses were introduced, I don't even know how long ago. I remember hearing about them in like high school. Smith, I like the idea of a little bit more. That just from a stability and progression standpoint, is it something that you had tried with a barbell and then you went to Smith, or you just always done it Smith?
Yeah, well, I started doing them back in it was either July or August. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to be nitpicky. It was summer of 2022. I did them with a barbell. I started off with, I want to say like 75 or 85 pounds. And I did them with the same technique that I do in the Smith. So to me personally, I don't think it made too much of a difference. The one kind of caveat for this is since it's a hybrid lift, it's very awkward to standardize with a barbell. So while
Yeah.
I absolutely think it's worth doing if you don't have access to a Smith with a barbell, that's just another little thing that kind of muddies the progression a little bit. So I would still track progression, but if you get too caught up in that, it's going to drive you nuts. So standardize form the best you can. Try and get a straight bar path, but don't overthink the progression with it. Just add weight when you feel like you're ready to or when you can handle it. The Smith, since it's a hybrid lift, it obviously just it locks you into that position. So as long as your bar path is set to where it needs to be, you don't have to worry about it turning more into like a skull crusher or a close grip bench. Um, Another thing I'd add, just technique wise, it's kind of like a variation of a JM press.
Okay.
I initially was inspired to do them by a kind of a similar variation from someone that interacts with the channel. I talk to him on Instagram every now and then. His channel's Profit Fear. He does all sorts of like super length and bias lifts. He knows what he's talking about and stuff, but I'd say he goes more to the extreme with it. Definitely more than most people, or specifically myself, do. But yeah, I mean, I go like full stretch, like I to the point where like I can't even get the range of motion by pressing my arm like or doing this.
Yeah.
I would have to have like a ton of weight to get that deep range
Right,
of
right,
motion.
right.
So it
For
took a long
sure.
time to build up to it, but yeah, it's a big range of motion.
So, as far as volume and how you're breaking this up, it sounds like, are you having your own arm day, or is this at the end of an upper body workout?
Yeah, so it's at the end of a push or pull session. I
Okay.
think having a dedicated arm day is a little bit overrated. You kind of just have to set your program up properly. So
Mhm.
what I do that I think does make a fairly big-ish difference. Probably not a game changer by any means for most, but I follow a push-pull legs push-pull split.
Okay.
Instead of doing triceps after push, when your triceps are kind of like fatigued but not stimulated enough to grow, I just do biceps instead, and I'll throw triceps with my pull days. So it does not impact my performance at all. Contrary to popular belief or assumption, totally fine. Doesn't make a difference, and it's worked totally fine. So I don't think I'll be going back unless I happen to run into just like little maybe some type of overuse injury just from like repeating kind of the similar like elbow flexion 4 times a week or something. But even then, like training back, I don't know, especially the technique I use. There's not a whole ton of elbow flexion involved.
Yeah, I currently just do it at the end of upper days. So basically, I have two upper days a week, and it's just usually vertical pull, vertical press, horizontal pull, horizontal press, or flip that depending on the day, and then one bicep, one tricep exercise. So actually, I should say that I have added a second bicep and tricep like towards the end of my bulk when I was trying to hit the arm goal. So the volume is a little bit higher there. What's your total volume for arm work throughout the week?
So triceps, it's been typically 8 total sets per week, and
Okay.
biceps, yeah, about the same actually. And I would say eight is just like I I made really good progress on like 4 or 5 sets a week for quite a while. That's what brought me from like 16 and a half to 17 to 17.5. Then I increased it a bit. I don't think it's so much the volume as much as it is like the added variety. Um, because if I'm doing like super heavy preacher curls without a whole ton of like super controlled mind muscle connection-y type form, then maybe I'll add something like that in after to kind of complement it. So while that does add a set, I don't think it's the extra set that made the change. I think it's the added variety. Um, but yeah, volume, it certainly wasn't high. I think when your default is just to go crazy with the volume, your mind usually isn't in the right place.
Yeah, so presumably you're not doing 8 sets of JM press and 8 sets of preacher curl a week, right? So,
No, it's four sets of each of those a week.
mm,
Right now I'm doing 6 sets a week for triceps. I'll do two on JM and then I'll do a single arm push down, just one like brutal all out set where it's a
okay.
like double mechanical drop set. I'm kind of just experimenting with it.
Hmm.
Um, but that's more so just to make sure I'm kind of getting the long head going too.
How are you doing a mechanical drop set with a Preston or push
So
down?
single arm, what I'll do is kind of like diagonal crossbody push downs to basically to failure. I'll continue to do some partials, and then from there I'll go so it's directly by my side like this, and then I'll lean forward a little bit and kind of raise my arm to make it more like a skull crusher in a way. And then I find that there's something about that position that allows me to get a few more reps, probably a different region of the triceps. And then from there, once I'm doing partials, it looks ridiculous. It really does. But it feels incredible. So what I'll do is I'll kind of, as it's coming up right at the top of the range of motion, I'll like drive my chest and shoulder down. I'm
Hmm.
not recommending this to people. This is just what I do because I've built up very resilient elbows through preachers and JMs. I'll like explosively kind of jam my torso and my shoulder down to
Hmm.
start some momentum and finish the rep. And then I'll come back and do an eccentric and then do this. And I think it kind of exaggerates the stretch and builds some momentum.
Yeah.
It looks absurd. I'm not going to deny that at all.